At 3:12 a.m., somewhere in the world, a server logs a click you didn't make, a purchase you didn't approve, a location ping from a place you've never been, a profile update written by no one you know. Nothing explodes. No alarms, no emergency broadcast. Life goes on. And that's the strange part. Because the data that could quietly ruin your finances, your reputation, even your freedom, is already out there. Leaked, sold, copied, repackaged. So why aren't governments panicking? Why do they hold press conferences about inflation, fuel prices, interest rates, but barely flinch when billions of personal records spill into the wild? This matters now because data isn't just information anymore. It's infrastructure. It decides who gets loans, who gets jobs, who gets flagged, who gets ignored. And unlike money, once data escapes, it never really comes back. Let me tell you a story. A few years ago, a credit bureau, the kind that decides your financial life with a 3-digit number, lost the personal data of over 100 million people. Names, addresses, social security numbers, birth dates. In some countries, that's nearly half the population. There were apologies. There were hearings. There were fines. And then, nothing fundamental changed. No mass shutdown of digital systems, no radical redesign of data collection, no stop everything until this is fixed. Why? Because to governments, data leaks feel like personal problems, not systemic threats. Your problem, not theirs. Here's the uncomfortable setup. Modern governments run on data the same way old empires ran on land. More data means more visibility. More visibility means more control. More control means fewer surprises. Tax systems, welfare systems, identity systems, policing, healthcare, voting rolls, all data-driven. So when data gets compromised, governments face a trade-off. Protect citizens or protect the machine. And the machine always wins quietly. Let's break down how this system actually works, without the jargon. Every time you interact with the modern world, you generate exhaust. Not smoke, data. Your phone location, your payment history, your search behavior, your social graph. Individually, it's meaningless. Together, it's a mirror of your life. Governments don't collect all of this directly. They don't have to. Private companies do it better, cheaper, faster. Banks track spending. Telecoms track movement. Apps track habits. Platforms track attention. The government simply taps into the stream. Sometimes legally, sometimes quietly, sometimes retroactively. So when a massive data breach happens, what's really lost? Not just your privacy, predictability. And predictability is power. Here's the irony. The same data that can destroy an individual stabilizes the system. If 1 million people get their identities stolen, that's tragic. But if the state loses visibility into 1 million people, that's dangerous. So the incentives are skewed. Fixing data security properly would mean collecting less, centralizing less, sharing less. That weakens the system's sight. And governments hate flying blind. Now let's talk numbers, because this is where it gets uncomfortable. A single person's data, a full identity profile, can sell for a few dollars on underground markets. Cheap, disposable. But aggregated data, population-level data, that's priceless. It informs policy, predicts unrest, models economic behavior, optimizes tax collection. When governments look at a data breach, they don't see a moral failure first. They see a cost-benefit calculation. How many people harmed? How angry are they likely to get? How fast will attention move on? And most importantly, does this threaten the core system? Usually, the answer is no, because individuals absorb the damage. You cancel cards. You reset passwords. You fight with call centers. You prove you're you. The system stays online. There's a quiet joke among cybersecurity professionals. You don't need perfect security. You just need liability. As long as responsibility is diffused between companies, contractors, vendors, users, no one actor bears enough pain to force change. Governments know this, so they regulate just enough to look serious, fine just enough to look tough, promise reforms just vague enough to delay. Meanwhile, data collection accelerates. More digitization, more IDs, more biometric systems, more centralized databases. Because crises don't slow data hunger, they justify it. Terrorism, pandemics, financial fraud, misinformation. Every threat becomes a reason to collect more just in case. Now here's the hidden mechanism almost no one talks about. Data breaches don't scare governments because they don't destabilize power evenly. They hit citizens asymmetrically. The wealthy can insulate, the connected can recover, the invisible take the hit. Wrong credit score? Loan denied. Wrong data flag? Visa delayed. Wrong algorithmic risk label? Extra screening, extra scrutiny, extra friction. And appealing these decisions is often impossible because the logic lives inside systems no human fully controls. This is where hype meets reality. We're told data is the new oil, but oil spills trigger emergency responses. Data spills trigger press releases. Why? Because oil destroys environments visibly. Data destroys lives quietly, one at a time. So there's no single moment that forces panic, just a slow normalization of risk. Now zoom out. Imagine a future where identity theft is so common that it's treated like background noise, where prove you're you becomes a permanent condition of citizenship, where access to money, movement, and opportunity depends on databases that are constantly compromised. From a government's perspective, this isn't collapse, it's friction. Manageable friction. In fact, some friction is useful. It discourages dissent. It slows mobility. It filters populations. A perfectly smooth system is fragile. A slightly broken one is controllable. This is the quiet logic no one states out loud. Governments aren't unconcerned because they're evil or incompetent. They're unconcerned because the damage pattern doesn't threaten sovereignty. Yet. But here's the risk they're underestimating. Data systems compound. Old breaches don't expire. They stack. A leak from 10 years ago, plus a leak from last year, plus AI-powered synthesis today, creates profiles more accurate than reality. False data becomes permanent truth, at scale. When that happens, trust erodes not emotionally, but operationally. People stop believing outcomes are fair. Markets misprice risk. Institutions lose legitimacy. And when legitimacy goes, no amount of data can buy it back. So the real question isn't why governments aren't worried. It's when they'll realize they waited too long. Because the same data that helps run the system can eventually convince people the system isn't worth trusting. And once that belief spreads, quietly, person by person, no database can contain it. So ask yourself this. If your digital shadow can outlive your real self, who's responsible for keeping it honest? And what happens when no one truly is?